Incident at the window. It chanced on Sunday, when Mr. Utterson was on his usual walk with Mr. Enfield, that their way lay once again through the by-street, and that when they came in front of the door, both stopped to gaze on it. "Well," said Enfield, "that story's at an end at least. We shall never see more of Mr. Hyde." "I hope not," said Utterson. "Did I ever tell you that I once saw him and shared your feeling of repulsion?" "It was impossible to do one without the other," returned Enfield. "And by the way, what an ass you must have thought of me not to know that this was a back way to Dr. Jekyll's. It was partly your own fault that I found it out, even when I did." "So you found it out, did you?" said Utterson. "But if that be so, we may step into the court and take a look at the windows. To tell you the truth, I am uneasy about poor Jekyll, and even outside I feel as if the presence of a friend might do him good." The court was very cool and a little damp, and full of premature twilight, although the sky, high up overhead, was still bright with sunset. The middle one of the three windows was halfway open, and sitting close behind it, taking the air with an infinite sadness of mien, like some disconsolate prisoner, Utterson saw Dr. Jekyll. And mien is just a person's mood or appearance. What? So what's happened is basically Utterson and Enfield have been out for their Sunday walk. They've come across the door. It's reminded them. Enfield didn't even really realise it was a back door to Dr. Jekyll's house, so they decided to go into the courtyard and have a wee look. "What? Jekyll!" he cried. "I trust you are better." "I am very low, Utterson," replied the doctor drearily. "Very low. It will not last long, thank God." You stay too much indoors," said the lawyer. "You should be out, whipping up the circulation like Mr. Enfield and me. This is my cousin, Mr. Enfield, Dr. Jekyll. Come now, get your hat and take a quick turn with us." "You are very good," sighed the other. "I should like to very much, but no, it is quite impossible. I dare not. But indeed, Utterson, I am very glad to see you. This really is a great pleasure. I would ask you and Mr. Enfield up, but the place is really not fit." "Why then," said the lawyer good-naturedly, "the best thing we can do is to stay down here and speak with you from where we are." "That is just what I was about to venture to propose," returned the doctor with a smile. But the words were hardly uttered before the smile was struck out of his face and succeeded by an expression of such abject terror and despair as froze the very blood of the two gentlemen below. They saw it but for a glimpse, for the window was instantly thrust down, but that glimpse had been sufficient, and they turned and left the court without a word. In silence too they traversed the by-street, and it was not until they had come into a neighbouring thoroughfare, where even upon a Sunday there were still some stirrings of life, that Mr. Utterson at last turned and looked at his companion. They were both pale, and there was an answering horror in their eyes. So they decided to hang out with Dr. Jekyll, hang out outside the window. Why not? Might as well. He's not coming out for a walk. He's looking really ill. Let's stand and have a wee chat. And there you go. You see Utterson and Enfield, two gentlemen about town, chatting to the doctor, and then suddenly he thrust down his window. We're told there that there was a smile, and then the words were hardly uttered before the smile was struck out of his face and succeeded by an expression of such abject terror and despair that it froze the very blood of the two gentlemen below. What it's saying there really is continuing on, it's developing that idea that there's been a sudden change in Dr. Jekyll's appearance, and this appearance has really put terror and fear into Utterson and Enfield. What other character have we met that can have that effect upon people? And there we go, and answering, they both understood what's happening to their friend Jekyll. We think they've got an idea that Jekyll's certainly not well. God forgive us! God forgive us! said Mr. Utterson. But Mr. Enfield only nodded his head very seriously and walked on once more in silence. The last night. Before we go into that, so that chapter being very important, we get a glimpse there of Dr. Jekyll and present day Dr. Jekyll, so to speak. We get to see how he is as the narrative has developed, it's happening right now. It's not being talked about in the past like his dinner parties when he felt better. This has happened right now, and we're being treated to it in the present moment. The last night. Mr. Utterson was sitting by his fireside one evening after dinner when he was surprised to receive a visit from Poole. "Bless me, Poole, what brings you here?" he cried, and then, taking a second look at him, "What ails you?" he added. "Is the doctor ill?" "Mr. Utterson," said the man, "there is something wrong." "Take a seat, and here's a glass of wine for you," said the lawyer. "Now, take your time, and tell me plainly what you want." "You know the doctor's ways, sir," replied Poole, "and how he shuts himself up. Well, he's shut up again in the cabinet, and I don't like it, sir. I wish I may die if I like it. Mr. Utterson, sir, I am afraid." Little picture of Poole there. "Now, my good man," said the lawyer, "be explicit. What are you afraid of?" "I've been afraid for about a week," returned Poole, doggedly disregarding the question, "and I can bear it no more." The man's appearance amply bore out of his words. His manner was altered for the worse, and except for the moment when he first announced his terror, he had not once looked the lawyer in the face. Even now he sat with the glass of wine untasted on his knee, and his eyes directed to the corner of the floor. Look at the characterization there. His body language, what's happening. It really gives us that impression that there's something gravely wrong with Poole, and therefore with Jekyll. "I can bear it no more," he repeated. "Come," said the lawyer. "I see you have some good reason, Poole. I see there is something seriously amiss. Try to tell me what it is." "I think there's been foul play," said Poole hoarsely. "Foul play?" cried the lawyer, a good deal frightened and rather inclined to be irritated in consequence. "What foul play? What does the man mean?" Foul play is when somebody's usually been killed or something like that, or murdered, or some crimes happened against them and it's not been fair. Maybe it's been tried to be covered up or something like that. So he asks what the man means. "I daren't say, sir," was the answer, "but will you come along with me and see for yourself?" Mr. Utterson's only answer was to rise and get his hat and great coat, but he observed with wonder the greatness of the relief that appeared upon the butler's face, and perhaps with no less, that the wine was still untasted when he set it down to follow. It was a wild, cold, seasonable night of March. Look at the setting being used, with a pale moon lying on her back as though the wind had tilted her, and flying wrack of the most diaphanous and lawny texture. The wind made talking difficult and flecked the blood into the face. So it's making the face appear all bloody. It's making the face appear with lots of bloodshotness in it. The face isn't bleeding, it's just getting very red because it's so cold. It seemed to have swept the streets unusually bare of passengers or empty streets. Besides, for Mr. Utterson thought he had never seen that part of London so deserted. Look what Stevenson's doing here. He's really using setting to create a sense of dread. We now, as readers, feel uneasy about this. He is intentionally making us feel uneasy by creating a deserted night, a deserted, cold, wild night, wherein we can see the moon that's on our back. It's not a great big beautiful thin moon, and it's the idea that it's so cold that the faces have turned red and that London is empty. He could have wished it otherwise. Never in his life had he been so conscious of so sharp a wish to see and touch his fellow creatures, for struggle as he might. There was borne in upon his mind a crushing anticipation of calamity. There was a feeling in his mind something bad was going to happen. The square, when they got there, was full of wind and dust, and the thin trees in the garden were lashing themselves along the railing. So when they arrived, the square, the trees are bashing off the metal railing. Poole, who had kept all the way a pace or two ahead, now pulled up in the middle of the pavement, and in spite of the biting weather, took off his hat and mopped his brow with a red pocket handkerchief. But for all the hurry of his coming, these were not the dews of exertion that he wiped away, but the moisture of some strangling anguish, for his face was white and his voice, when he spoke, harsh and broken. This was not sweat because they'd been hurrying. This was sweat out of fear. "Well, sir," he said, "here we are. God grant there be nothing wrong." "Amen, Poole," said the lawyer. Thereupon the servant knocked in a very guarded manner. The door was opened on a chain, and a voice asked from within, "Is that you, Poole?" "It's all right," said Poole. "Open the door." The hall, when they entered it, was brightly lighted up. The fire was built high, and about the hearth the whole of the servants, men and women, stood huddled together like a flock of sheep. At the sight of Mr. Utterson, the housemaid broke into hysterical whimpering. She was crying hysterically, and the cook, crying out, "Bless God, it's Mr. Utterson," ran forward as if to take him into her arms. "There's real fear here by the servants. They realise something is wrong." Let's see Mr. Utterson, the very Protestant, careful lawyer. Let's see what he is saying. What? Are you all here?" said the lawyer peevishly. "Very irregular, very unseemly. Your master would be far from pleased. Look, he is talking about reputation, the importance of reputation. Utterson is almost saying if Dr. Jekyll was to see you crying about hysterically, crying, being scared altogether, not working, why, he would be angry. You must maintain your reputation, that of hard-working servants," is what he's saying. Poole tries to back them up. Even Poole understands. They're feared. They're scared. They're all afraid, said Poole. Blank silence followed. No one protesting. Only the maid lifted her voice, and now, went loudly. She was crying really loudly. "Hold your tongue," Poole said to her, with a ferocity of accent that testified to his own jangled nerves. And indeed, when the girl had so suddenly raised the note of her lamentation, they had all stared and turned towards the inner door with faces of dreadful expectation. "And now," continued the butler, addressing the knife boy, "reach me a candle, and we'll get through hands at once." And then he begged Mr. Utterson to follow him, and led the way to the back garden. So the house. Oh, where's Jekyll's cat? All right, mate. So the house is full of terror, full of fear, full of worry. The servants, they are scared. Something is happening that is scaring them. And now Mr. Poole has led Mr. Utterson out to the back garden. "Now, sir," said he, "you come as gently as you can. I want you to hear, and I don't want you to be heard. And see here, sir, if by any chance he was to ask you in, don't go." Poole doesn't want Jekyll to obviously know that Utterson has visited him. He doesn't want to disturb him. He wants Utterson to hear what the others have heard. And he begs him, if Dr. Jekyll invites him into the room, do not go. Mr. Utterson's nerves at this unlooked-for termination gave a jerk that nearly threw him from his balance, but he recollected his courage and followed the butler into the laboratory building through the surgical theatre, with its lumber of crates and bottles to the foot of the stair. And again, Stevenson's use of setting here. It's an old laboratory and surgical theatre. These are not nice images. And the Gothic genre within which Jekyll and Hyde is certainly a part of, like Frankenstein and other novels, this is a scary image. He's using very different settings. He's using very different settings here to create an atmosphere of fear, to create a sense of dread. He's using laboratories, surgical laboratories, within which obviously people would be dissected and cut up. It's not a nice environment, and that is why obviously he is leading them for the climax of the novella to this strange room. Give me 2 seconds. Sorry, my cat has just gone mental, clawed me and made a mess. Thanks for that, Dr. Jekyll's cat. Go away. Okay. to apologise. Here, Poole motioned him to stand on one side and listen, while he himself, setting down the candle and making a great and obvious call on his resolution, mounted the steps and knocked with a somewhat uncertain hand on the red baize of the cabinet door. "Mr. Utterson, sir, asking to see you," he called, and even as he did so, once more violently signed to the lawyer to give ear, to listen carefully. A voice called from within. "Tell him I cannot see anyone," it said complainingly. "Thank you, sir," said Poole, with a note of something like triumph in his voice, and taking up his candle, he led Mr. Utterson back across the yard and into the great kitchen, where the fire was out and the beetles were leaping on the floor. "Sir," he said, looking Mr. Utterson in the eyes, "was that my master's voice?" "It seems much changed," replied the lawyer, very pale but giving look for look. So Utterson realises something's up. "Changed? Well, yes, I think so," said the butler. "Have I been 20 years in this man's house to be deceived about his voice?" "No, sir. Master's made away with. He was made away with 8 days ago when we heard him cry out upon the name of God. And who's in there instead of him, and why it stays there, is a thing that cries to heaven, Mr. Utterson." So what he's saying is this change has been about 8 days this has happened. He first noticed this change in voice. Poole has been Jekyll's butler for 20 years. He knows the sound of his master's voice. And he says 8 days ago, ever since he heard a blood-curdling call to God, that cried in the name of God, this strange voice has taken the place of Dr. Jekyll. Poole suggests he thinks possibly something bad's happened to Jekyll, but he's not sure. There's something strange happening, certainly. "This is a very strange tale, Poole. This is a rather wild tale, my man," said Mr. Utterson, biting his finger. "Suppose it were as you suspect. Supposing Dr. Jekyll to have been, well, murdered. What could induce the murderer to stay? That won't hold water. It doesn't commend itself to reason." And then Poole comes back. "Well, Mr. Utterson, you are a hard man to satisfy, but I'll do it yet," said Poole. "All this last week, you must know, him or it, whatever it is that lives in that cabinet, has been crying night and day for some sort of medicine and cannot get it to his mind." Notice how Utterson's convinced that Jekyll's been murdered, or he's not convinced, but he's presuming certainly that he's been murdered, whereas Poole's offering a slightly different explanation here. So day and night, this thing about Jekyll, or this thing, has been crying for this type of medicine. It was sometimes his way, the master's that is, to write his orders on a sheet of paper and throw it on the stair. But we had nothing else this week back, nothing but papers and a closed door, and the very meals left there to be smuggled in when nobody was looking. So basically, Jekyll's not been out of his room for 8 days. He only comes out to get the meals that have been prepared, but when no one's looking. And there's been lots and lots of notes left for somebody to run, one of the servants to run an errand and to get this type of medicine. We've had nothing else this week back, nothing but papers and a closed door and the very meals left. No. Well, sir, every day, aye, and twice and thrice in the same day, there have been orders and complaints, and I have been sent flying to all the wholesale chemists in town. Every time I bought the stuff back, there would be another paper telling me to return it because it was not pure, and another order to a different firm. So Poole's been sent around all the pharmacies, all the chemists in the city for this specific drug, and every time it's coming back, and Jekyll is saying it's not, or this thing is saying it's not pure enough. And here, Poole has regularly gotten Dr. Jekyll drugs from the pharmacy, but over this past week has been sent lots of times each time, and to be told that the medication wasn't strong enough, it wasn't pure enough. And by drugs, it's not illegal drugs. Dr. Jekyll, obviously being a doctor, and being a Jekyll possibly, has access to pharmaceutical drugs. That's what it's referring to, really. If you want to read it that way. Could be read other ways, as it has been by the drug culture. Anyway, sorry. This drug he wanted bitter bad, sir, whatever for. He was desperate for this drug. Have you any of these papers? Asked Mr. Utterson. Poole felt in his pocket and handed out a crumpled note, which the lawyer, bending nearer to the candle, carefully examined. Its contents ran thus: Dr. Jekyll presents his compliments to Messrs. To sirs, basically, men, He assures them that the last sample is impure, and quite useless for his present purpose. In the year 18, Dr. J purchased a somewhat large quantity from Messrs. M. He now begs them to search with most sedulous care, and should any of the same quality be left, forward it to him at once. Expense is no consideration. The importance of this to Dr. J can hardly be exaggerated. So it's a letter saying, a long time ago I came to you guys and you got me a big bag of this pure stuff. Well, the stuff that you're getting since isn't pure, and it's not good enough for what I need it for. If you can find the same quality, the same purity anywhere, get it to me as soon as possible, and it doesn't matter about the cost, I will pay. It doesn't matter what you ask me to pay, I will pay for it. So far the letter had run composedly enough, but here, with a sudden splutter of the pen, the writer's emotion had broken loose. For God's sake, he added, find me some of the old. This is a strange note, said Mr. Utterson, and then sharply, how do you come to have it open? The man at Moss was main angry, sir, and he threw it back to me like so much dirt, returned Poole. This is unquestionably the doctor's hand, do you know, resumed the lawyer. I thought it looked like it, said the servant, rather sulkily. Poole, this was obviously being, and then with another voice, but what matters hand of right, he said. I've seen him. Seen him, repeated Mr. Utterson. Well, that's it, said Poole. It was this way. I came suddenly into the theatre from the garden. It seems he had slipped out to look for this drug or whatever it is, for the cabinet door was open, and there he was at the far end of the room digging among the crates. He looked up when I came in and gave a kind of cry and whipped upstairs into the cabinet. It was but for 1 minute that I saw him, but the hair stood upon my head like quills. Sir, if that was my master, why had he a mask upon his face? If that was my master, why did he cry out like a rat and run from me? I have served him long enough, and then... The man paused and passed his hand over his face. So it's building up tension. Look at the repetition of the questions he's asking Utterson. Look at the narrative that's been drawn out. We're being led towards it. Stevenson is brilliantly using the narrator to give the direct speech from Poole to Utterson. And then the narrator comes in. The man paused and passed his hand over his face. It's building up tension here. He's simply telling us here that the handwriting isn't that important, for Poole has seen this man. Poole has seen this thing. And he says that, and he tells them that he was out in the garden one night looking for the drug or whatever it was. And when he saw Poole, he gave out a little cry, but he gave a great big fright to Poole. Poole had the hairs in the back of his neck and his head stood up like quills. And he says, why was there a mask upon his face? Why did he cry out and run from him? And then the man paused and passed his hand over his face. We're told then, these are all very strange circumstances, said Mr. Utterson, but I think I begin to see daylight. Your master, Poole, is plainly seized with one of those maladies that both torture and deform the sufferer. Hence, for aught I know, the alteration of his voice, hence the mask and the avoidance of his friends, hence his eagerness to find this drug, by means of which the poor soul, look at the word choice, even after everything that's happening. Utterson is maintaining the reputation of his good friend Dr. Jekyll, and referring to him as a poor soul, retains the hope of ultimate recovery. God grant that he be not deceived. There is my explanation. It is sad enough, Poole, and appalling to consider, but it is plain and natural, hangs well together, and delivers us from all exuberant alarms. There we go. Look here. Just let me highlight here. That is my explanation. It is sad enough, aye, and appalling to consider. What he's saying is that poor Dr. Jekyll, there's something wrong with him. He's got some kind of mad disease or mental condition it's forced his face to deform. That's why his face is all changed. Why? It's even changed his voice. It's some crazy illness he must have. Poor Dr. Jekyll has an illness, despite all this strangeness, the uneasy environment, the knowledge that both Poole and Utterson are both disquiet. Even still, Utterson is maintaining Jekyll's reputation. This is what's wrong with him. Here's my explanation. I'm not a doctor, I'm a lawyer, but here we go. Just like me. Sad enough, plain and natural, that is Utterson in a nutshell. And just like the character, the explanation is dry, it is plain, and it is, well, it is natural. It is natural. It's a natural illness that Jekyll is suffering from. Poole, however, is not to be so convinced. He goes on and says, "Sir," said the butler, turning to a sort of mottled pallor, "that thing was not," look at the word choice, "thing was not my master, and there's the truth. My master," let me just highlight that for you. Poole is absolutely determined. This thing is not his master, absolutely not. "My master," he looked round him and began to whisper, "is a tall, fine build of a man, and this was more of a dwarf." Utterson attempted to protest. "Oh, sir," cried Poole, "do you think I do not know my master after 20 years? Do you think I do not know where his head comes to the cabinet door, where I saw him every morning of my life? No, sir, that thing in the mask was never Dr. Jekyll. God knows what it was, but it was never Dr. Jekyll. And it is the belief of my heart that there was murder done." So Poole is saying here, he's convinced there's been a murder done. Somebody's killed Jekyll. Even still, the language that he uses, he's not really allowing this. He believes something's happened, whereas Utterson knows that by breaking the door down, he's going to find some kind of thing that's happened that's bad, that's going to cause a slur upon the reputation of Dr. Jekyll. Utterson is aware of this, and he doesn't want to break the door down. He'd far rather just try and find the drug for poor Dr. Jekyll and make him feel better without anybody having to see or witness what has happened to him. Poole, on the other hand, believe a murder has taken place. But again, there's that idea that there's something strange about it. It's not just a normal murder, so to speak. So yeah, Poole believes that it's been murder. "Poole," replied the lawyer, "if you say that, it will become my duty to make certain. Much as I desire to spare your master's feelings, much as I am puzzled by this note which seems to prove him to be still alive, I shall consider it my duty to break in that door." So now that our legal aspects come into it, the idea of murder, suddenly Utterson's like, okay, fine, I'll break down that door. I know it's going to harm the reputation of my client, Dr. Jekyll, but we'll break down and find out if you think a murder's happened. "Ah, Mr. Utterson, that's talking," cried the butler. "And now comes the second question," resumed Utterson. "Who is going to do it?" "Why, you and me, sir," was the undaunted reply. Utterson wants nothing to do with it. "That's very well said," returned the lawyer, "and whatever comes of it, I shall make it my business to see that you are no loser." "There's an axe in the theatre," continued Poole, "and you might take the kitchen poker for yourself." The lawyer took that rude but weighty instrument into his hand and balanced it. "Do you know, Poole," he said, looking up, "that you and I are about to place ourselves in a position of some peril?" "You may say so, sir, indeed," returned the butler. "It is well, then, that we should be frank," said the other. "We both think more than we have said. Let us make a clean breast. This masked figure that you saw, did you recognise it?" "Well, sir, it went so quick and the creature was so doubled up that I hardly swear to it," was the answer. "But if you mean, was it Mr. Hyde? Why, yes, I think it was. You see, it was much of the same bigness, and it had the same quick, light way about it. And then, who else could have got into the laboratory door? You have not forgot, sir, that at the time of the murder he had still the key with him. But that's not all. I don't know, Mr. Hutchinson, if you have ever met this Mr. Hyde." Yes, said the lawyer. Only spoke with him. I once spoke with him. Then you must know as well as the rest of us that there was something queer, something strange about that gentleman. Something that gave a man a turn. I don't know rightly how to say it, sir, beyond this, that you felt in your marrow kind of cold and thin. So he's talking about that strange feeling of hatred everyone gets when they see Hyde. I felt something of what you described, said Mr. Utterson. Quite so, sir, returned Poole. Well, when that masked thing like a monkey jumped from among the chemicals and whipped into the cabinet, it went down my spine like ice. Oh, I know it's not evidence, Mr. Utterson. I am book learned enough for that. But a man has his feelings, and I give you my Bible word, it was Mr. Hyde! I don't know why I read it like that, sorry. I give you my Bible word, it was Mr. Hyde. There we go, that's a little bit better. Got a bit overexcited there. So again, he's going on and telling us about this idea that when he saw this creature, it wasn't Jekyll. And he got that feeling of hatred, fear, disgust that everyone feels when they come in contact with Mr. Hyde. And he says he'll swear in the Bible it was definitely Hyde. Aye, said the lawyer. My fears incline to the same point. Evil I fear founded. Evil was sure to come of that connection. Aye, truly I believe you. I believe poor Harry is killed, and I believe his murderer, for what purpose God alone can tell, is still lurking in his victim's room. Well, let our name be Vengeance. Call Bradshaw. The footman came to the summons, very white and nervous, another servant. Pull yourself together, Bradshaw, said the lawyer. This suspense, I know, is telling upon all of you, but it is now our intention to make an end of it. And again, the writer is consciously having Utterson build up to this idea of suspense, just like the writer's been building up, narrator of the story. The suspense, I know, is telling upon all of you, but it is now our intention to make an end of it. Poole, here, and I am going to force our way into the cabinet. If all is well, my shoulders are broad enough to bear the blame. So even now, Utterson doesn't want really to break down this beautiful door, just expose or ruin, sully the reputation of his client, but he knows he's got no other way. If all is well, my shoulders broad enough to bear the blame. Meanwhile, lest anything should really be amiss, or any malefactor seek to escape by the back, you and the boy must go round the corner with a pair of good sticks and take your post at the laboratory door. We give you 10 minutes to get your stations. So he's saying, we'll give you 10 minutes. You and that other guy, you get round the back with a couple of big heavy sticks. So if the murderer Hyde they're expecting was to run away, they can batter him with the sticks and not let him escape. As Bradshaw left, the lawyer looked at his watch. And now, Poole, let us get to ours, he said, and taking the poker under his arm led the way into the yard. The scud had banked, look at the setting, the scud had banked over the moon, and now it was quite dark. The wind, which broke only in puffs and draughts into the deep well of a building, tossed the light of the candle to and fro about their steps until they came into the shelter of the theatre, where they all sat down silently to wait. London hummed solemnly all around, but nearer at hand the stillness was only broken by the sounds of footfall moving to and fro along the cabinet floor. So again, setting's been brought back into it. It's absolutely dark now. The moon is no longer out. Clouds have gone over it. The wind still occasionally bursts through the building, and they sit and they wait 10 minutes, and all they can hear are the sounds of walking back and forth along the cabinet floor. Terrifying. So it will walk all day, sir, whispered Poole. Aye, and the better part of the night. Only when a new sample comes from the chemist there's a bit of a break. It's an ill conscience at such an enemy to rest. Ah, sir, there's a blood foully shed in every step of it. But hark again, a little closer. Put your heart in your ears, Mr. Utterson, and tell me. Is that the doctor's foot? Does that sound like the doctor's footsteps? He's a big guy. The steps fell lightly and oddly with a certain swing, for all they went so slowly. It was different indeed from the heavy creaking tread of Henry Jekyll. Utterson sighed. "Is there never anything else?" he asked. Poole nodded. "Once," he said. "Once I heard it weeping, crying." "Weeping? How that?" said the lawyer, conscious of a sudden chill of horror. "Weeping like a woman or a lost soul," said the butler. Very important quote there, a word choice. "I came away with that upon my heart, that I could have wept too." So only once did Poole hear this thing, he supposes Jekyll or Hyde or whatever it is, crying. And that's a terrible amount of sadness reflected directly upon Poole, and it felt like he could cry as well. But now the 10 minutes drew to an end. Poole disinterred the axe from under a stack of packing straw. The candle was set upon the nearest table to light them to the attack, and as they drew near with bated breath to where, have I skipped on too much? No, I've not. Just building up the tension for you, obviously. And they drew near with bated breath to where the patient foot was still going up and down in the quiet of the night. "Jekyll!" cried Utterson with a loud voice. "I demand to see you!" He paused a moment, but there came no reply. "I give you fair warning. Our suspicions are aroused, and I must and shall see you," he resumed. "If not by fair means, then by foul. If not by your consent, then by brute force." So he's saying, "Jekyll, come out. I demand to see you. If you're not going to let me in, I'm going to batter down I'm going to batter down the door. I'm going to break down the door." "Utterson," said the voice, "for God's sake, have mercy!" "Ah, that's not Dr. Jekyll's voice. It's Hyde's," cried Utterson. "Down with the door, Poole!" So let's smash the door down. That's not Jekyll's voice. Let's smash it down. Poole swung the axe over his shoulder. The blow shook the building, and the red baize door leaped open against the lock and hinges. A dismal screech, as of mere animal terror, rang up from the cabinet. "Ah!" Something like that. Up went the axe again, and again the panels crushed and crashed. The frame bounded 4 times. The blow fell, but the wood was tough and the fittings were of excellent workmanship, and it was not until the 5th that the lock burst and the wreck of the door fell inwards on the carpet. The besiegers, appalled by their own riot and the stillness that had succeeded, stood back a little and peered in. There lay the cabinet before their eyes in the quiet lamplight, a good fire glowing and chattering on the hearth, the kettle singing in its thin strain, a drawer or two open, papers neatly set forth on the business table, and nearer the fire the things laid out for tea. The quietest room, you would have said, and, but for the glazed presses full of chemicals, the most commonplace that night in London. So they walked in and everything just looked normal. All this fear, everything was just normal. There was tea laid out for things laid out for a cup of tea. There was a fire going. It was peaceful. Right in the middle there lay the body of a man, sorely contorted, all bent over and still twitching. They drew near on tiptoe, turned it on its back, and beheld the face of Edward Hyde. He was dressed in clothes far too large for him, clothes of the doctor's bigness. The cords on his face still moved with a semblance of life, but life was quite gone, and by the crushed vial in the hand and strong smell of kernels that hung upon the air, Utterson knew that he was looking upon the body of a self-destroyer. He's committed suicide, quite simply. His face is still twitching, and there's a little glass bottle of poison that he's obviously drunk. "We have come too late," he said sternly, "whether to save or punish. Hyde is gone to his account, and it only remains for us to find the body of your master." So they found Hyde basically dressed in what looks like Jekyll's clothing, and they now have got to find the body of Dr. Jekyll, obviously, because Hyde's obviously killed Jekyll. Let's go and find. I wonder where he's hidden him. Where's he hiding? Hyde. No. The far greater proportion of the building was occupied by the theatre, which filled almost the whole ground story and was lighted from above, and by the cabinet which formed an upper story at one end and looked upon the court. A corridor joined the theatre to the door on the by-street, and with this the cabinet communicated separately by a second flight of stairs. There were, besides a few dark closets, a spacious cellar. All these they now thoroughly examined. Each closet needed but a glance, for all were empty, and all, by the dust that fell from their doors, had stood long unopened. So they're checking out all these big rooms, but none of them have been touched for ages. The cellar indeed was filled with crazy lumber, mostly dating from the times the surgeon who was Jekyll's predecessor, and even as they opened the door, they were advertised of the uselessness of a further search by the fall of a perfect mat of cobwebs which had for years sealed up the entrance. Nowhere was there any trace of Henry Jekyll, dead or alive. Poole stamped on the flags of the corridor. "He must be buried here," he said, hearkening to the sound. "Or he may have fled," said Utterson, and he turned to examine the door end by the by-street. It was locked, and lying near by the flags they found the key, already stained with rust. "This does not look like use," observed the lawyer. "Use!" echoed Poole. "Do you not see, sir, it is broken, much as if a man had stamped on it." So they found the key, but the key was covered in rust and it's been broken. It can't be used. Somebody stamped on it and two. "Aye," continued Utterson, "and the fractures too are rusty." The two men looked at each other with a scare. "This is beyond me, Poole," said the lawyer. "Let us go back to the cabinet." They mounted the stair in silence, and still with an occasional awestruck glance at the dead body, proceeded more thoroughly to examine the contents of the cabinet. They've looked everywhere and they can't find Jekyll, so they've gone back. At one table there were traces of chemical work, various measured heaps of some white salt being laid on glass saucers, as though for an experiment in which the unhappy man had been prevented. "This is the same drug that I was always bringing him," said Poole, and even as he spoke, the kettle with a startling noise boiled over. This brought them to the fireside, where the easy chair was drawn cosily up, and the tea things stood ready to the sitter's elbow, the very sugar in the cup. There were several books on the shelf. One lay beside the tea things open, and Utterson was amazed to find a copy of pious work, for which Jekyll had several times expressed a great esteem, annotated in his own hand with startling blasphemies. What this is telling us is that they found a book of pious work, most likely to be a Bible. And on this Bible, they found blasphemies, things that going against God, perhaps worshipping Satan, worshipping the devil, certainly against the idea of religion, of God, of good, of everything like that. Evil has been written upon the pages of the Holy Book. Next, and I'll just to double explain there for you, Next, in the course of the review of the review of the chamber, the searchers came to the cheval glass, a great big full-length mirror, into whose depths they looked with an involuntary horror. But it was so turned as to show them nothing but the rosy glow playing on the roof, the fire sparkling in 100 repetitions along the glazed front of the presses, and their own pale and fearful countenance stooping to look in. "This glass has seen some strange things, sir," whispered Poole. "And surely no stranger than itself," echoed the lawyer in the same tones. "For what did Jekyll—" He caught himself up in the word with a start, and then conquered the weakness. "What could Jekyll want with it?" he said. He's saying, why would Jekyll want to be looking at himself in a big mirror? "You may say that," said Poole. Poole's perhaps beginning to work out what's maybe happening. Next they turned to the business table. On the desk among the neat array of papers, a large envelope was uppermost, and bore in the doctor's hand the name of Mr. Utterson. The lawyer unsealed it, and several enclosures, certain items fell to the floor. The first was a will, drawn in the same eccentric terms as the one which had been returned 6 months before, to serve as a testament in case of death, and as a deed of gift in case of disappearance. So basically, they found this will, but with the same mad things that are saying, if I die, all my belongings should go to this guy. If I'm not seen for a few months, all my belongings are to go as well. But however, it's told in case of disappearance, but in place of the name Edward Hyde, the lawyer with indescribable amazement read the name of Gabriel John Utterson. He looked at Poole and then back at the paper, and last of all at the dead malefactor stretched upon the carpet. So what he's done there is he's obviously the word choice of the word Gabriel, which an implicit link to the angel Gabriel. You can analyse that in more depth if you like. But this will, instead of saying, remember the will used to say that if anything happened, give it all to Hyde. Well, now everything needs to go to Jekyll. Sorry, to go to Utterson. Utterson can't believe it. He's looked at Poole, then he looked at the paper, and then last of all, he looked at the dead body of Hyde lying on the carpet. My head goes round, he said. He has been all these days in possession. He had no cause to like me. He must have raged to see himself displaced, and he has not destroyed this document. Maintaining reputations. He caught up the next paper. It was a brief note in the doctor's hand and dated at the top. "Oh, Poole," the lawyer cried, "he was alive and here this day. He cannot have been disposed of in so short a space. He must be still alive. He must have fled. And then, why fled? And how? And in that case, can we venture to declare this suicide? Oh, we must be careful. I foresee that we may yet involve your master in some dire catastrophe." So, this final letter has been written that very day. Utterson's now convinced that Jekyll must be alive. A body couldn't have been disposed of so quickly in one day. So he must be alive, or he must have run away or something like that. But he worries that whatever it is, the doctor's in a lot of trouble and his reputation will obviously be damaged. "Why don't you read it, sir?" asked Poole. "Because I fear," replied the lawyer solemnly. "God grant I have no cause for it." And with that, he brought the paper to his eyes and read as follows. "My dear Utterson, when this shall fall into your hands, I shall have disappeared. Under what circumstances, I have not the penetration to foresee. But my instinct and all the circumstances of my nameless situation tell me that the end is sure and must be early. Go then and read the first narrative which Lanyon warned me he was about to place in your hands. And if you care to hear more, turn to the confession of your unworthy and unhappy friend, Henry Jekyll." So a wee letter's been found here, and he's basically saying, if you're reading this, then obviously I've disappeared. Not talking about death, but talking about disappearance. Under what circumstances, he doesn't have the ability to see into the future and know. But it's very much that idea of disappeared. It's really quite... it should really be saying to Utterson, this isn't a case of murder. Far from it. "There was a third enclosure," asked Utterson. "Here, sir," said Poole, and gave into his hand a considerable packet, an envelope sealed in several places. The lawyer put it in his pocket. "I would say nothing of this paper." Preserving Jekyll's reputation. "If your master has fled or is dead, we may at least save his credit, save his reputation. It is now 10. I must go home and read these documents in quiet, but I shall be back before midnight when we shall send for the police." So he said, I'm going to be back within 2 hours, and then we're going to call for the police. They went out, locking the door of the theatre behind them, and Utterson, once more leaving the servants gathered about in the fire in the hall, trudged back to his office to read the 2 narratives in which this mystery was now to be explained. And then we get on to Dr. Lanyon and obviously Jekyll's narratives there. Traditionally, in a detective novel, in this in this climax, if you like, well, it's a climax, we'd expect the detective to really have solved it, some ingenious way of working out who the guilty person is, and they have a solution. Utterson, who's been our detective, as we've had it been told through the point of view of his eyes, our detective still is none the wiser. He's not sure what's happened. Up until the very last, he was sure it must be murder. He's really not sure. He's really not sure at all. But even still, this is the last that we really see of Utterson. Even still, The dry lawyer is not prepared to even contemplate the idea of the supernatural. He's not allowing himself to even consider it. There must be an explanation here. Utterson's ignorance and restraint by the morals of Victorian society and the customs of the Victorian society are really blinding him as to opening his eyes and seeing what is happening and what the truth is. We again throughout these chapters, this chapter especially, we see the nightmarish setting. We see the fog, the moon, and everything like that coming here. We intentionally see Stevenson making Utterson remain so far from the truth. Without Lanyon and Jekyll's letters at the end, he would never have discovered the truth. Stevenson intentionally does this. Even servants in the pool realise that something crazy is happening. And again, when Utterson arrives, we see him saying that the master will be far from pleased. Again, worrying about reputation. All throughout this this novella, but this chapter especially, Utterson really wants to maintain his good friend Harry Jekyll or Henry Jekyll's reputation throughout. He tries everything so he doesn't have to break the door down, as well as we can see. We can see that he's trying to reason and say, well, it must be some deformity the poor man's got. Let's not break it down. Is he scared of the truth? You could quite easily analyse it that way, that he's scared of the truth. He's scared to discover what lies beyond the door. For one, yes, it'll obviously damage the reputation of his good client, and therefore himself. Remember, it's not just Jekyll's reputation at stake here. But also he's scared to possibly find out the world of the supernatural order within the novella that we see, which certainly Lanyon would have none of, and we see that Utterson wouldn't really have any of. He's a lawyer and a Christian, simple as that. There's no hocus pocus mad things in the world. It's all got to be rational and got to have an explanation for everything. This really brings to the front the Victorian ideals over truth. Utterson doesn't even want to entertain the idea of the supernatural, or that his client's reputation is going to be killed, or is going to be destroyed or harmed. Utterson, all throughout, is absolutely against any concept of duality. He believes that all people are like him, quite boring, good, Christian, straight-laced, that's it. And also against he goes against this idea of duality, and also he reinforces this idea of reputation and the importance of reputation all throughout the novella. Now, the genre of this is overtly a Gothic novel. It is written within the Gothic genre. Gothic really can cover a wide range of different styles. You can even argue that Jane Eyre by Austen is a Gothic novel of sorts, of sorts. Obviously, Frankenstein is a Gothic novel. Quite a lot of the works of Edgar Allan Poe are Gothic. If something's Gothic, basically it deals with a secret or a mystery that has to be sorted out. Very dark or very mysterious settings and environments, things which make you feel uneasy, and it usually deals with some element or hints at some element of the supernatural. So that very overtly makes this a Gothic novella. Make sure you've got some incredible quotes from these couple of chapters written down. Make sure you're analysing, make sure you're highlighting, using different highlighters to highlight different ideas, different things like quotes, themes and so on. Really make sure that you're getting a full picture now. As far as we're concerned, this is the story over, finished. This is the last chapter. All we get now are the two letters to furthermore explain what exactly has happened, to tie up the loose ends. A very creative and very clever masterstroke by Robert Louis Stevenson here. We expect to know, all throughout we expect to know what's happening at the end. We certainly expect Utterson to realise what's happening, but even he doesn't. It's really left to these two letters to discover the truth.